Today, guys, you may notice something a little bit different about my user interface. Down here in the bottom left-hand corner, as you can see, I've actually got some extra numbers on screen. I have something that says DPS, I have something that says highest damage and time. What is this? Well, this is an overlay, an add-on that I've been using for Guild Wars 2 the past couple of weeks called JaxNX, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, but it's a DPS meter. So, why can't I believe that I'm saying it's a DPS meter? Well, if you'd asked me a year ago, a year and a half ago, whether I'd do a video on one of these things, my answer categorically would have been no. See, until very recently, with raiding, with Heart of Thorns, where perhaps people care more about this kind of thing, it's never really been possible to run a DPS meter that wasn't illegal for Guild Wars 2 in some sense. So, previous DPS meters to this one, JaxNX, they've all hooked into RAM somehow, they've all hooked into the game client, they've all done things that possibly could be nefarious, possibly could get you banned, probably are against the end-user license agreement for the game, and are kind of dodgy. So, these are the old DPS meters that still exist for what it's worth, but that would actually tell you explicitly the health of enemies, give you information that Arenanet purposely, through design, have tried to obfuscate, have tried to remove in favor of basically creating an MMO that is not toxic. And so now, though, there's JaxNX. Now there's this new DPS meter, and this one doesn't hook into RAM. This one avoids those old issues of other DPS meters that could make it potentially weird or a grey area. This thing, as far as I can tell, is categorically okay to use. And that's why I'm making a video on it for you guys today. I think it's absolutely awesome. I do want to talk about the implications of what running a DPS meter in Guild Wars 2 does, how it's changed the game in some ways, and exactly how this thing works. So, why is JaxNX better than the other ones? Well, it's all about the way it works. Technologically speaking, JaxNX isn't doing anything more harmful than, say, Sweet Effects or Reshade or any of these graphics enhancement mods. It's just an overlay, and in fact, I'm running both together right now. As you can see, I can toggle my Reshade on or off there. I've done videos on Reshade, so why not do one on this? The way that it works is, it's quite simple. Down here, we obviously get our information. If I were to start fighting things, these numbers would start going up. The more that we attack things, if you guys don't know the whole premise of a DPS meter here, so we got this Zintal Cavalier here, right? So we can start attacking him, and as you'll see, as we do damage, this DPS meter tells me that I was doing, at a max there, about 9,000 damage every second. And now it's going lower because I can't hit this enemy anymore because he was invulnerable and the previous guy died. And now I can start attacking again, and if I start attacking again, you'll see my DPS starts going up. At the very bottom, you've got that time counter. It says that I've been in combat for 24 seconds right now. The total damage that I've done continues to climb. I just got killed there. And it's also recorded for me on highest down there. The highest individual hit it's seen me accomplish throughout the entire fight. And the way that it works is once the fight is over, once I break combat after a certain amount of time, everything freezes, and it gives me like what my final details were, what my final numbers were. As you can see, it's frozen at 42 seconds there. So over 42 seconds, I did about 5,000 damage every second, including the time I couldn't fight, including the time I was downstate, and so on. What this stuff's useful for is in raids. Specifically in raids, it's really handy that you can go in there, try out different traits, try out different builds, different classes entirely, and you can compare, as I have done, your Glass Staff Elementalist, how much damage he's been doing, versus, say, your condition damage Necromancer. And you can see, like, how different tactics and what order you press your skills in end up helping you increase your damage. And especially when you start raiding, and especially when you start practicing at that really hard stuff in the game, having that numeric there, having that obvious example of, hey, this build is doing more damage, you should probably keep trying this, is really, really helpful to let you learn more about the game and help you improve. Now, as I said earlier, Arenanet have absolutely made a game where they don't support DPS meters natively, and I think the whole reason for this is they don't want to create a toxic environment. It's the same reason I can't come up to this guy here, right-click him, and then select Inspect like you would in other MMOs, and I can see, oh, actually, he's in really crappy blue gear, and I don't want to play with him. So Arenanet have done a lot of things like that to try and remove toxicity, but now that these are actually in-game, now that raiding exists, now that things have slightly changed since Heart of Thorns, I wouldn't be surprised to see that not only are Arenanet okay with this, since it doesn't hook into RAM, but also, I don't know, I wouldn't be crazy shocked to see that they end up making their own natively supported version eventually one day. That may be a bit of a wild theory, though. But so how is this working? How did it figure all of that out? How did it know how much damage I was doing? Well, the trick is through screenshots. So it's actually very simple. First of all, it's a basic little overlay that appears in front of your screen so that you can see the numbers, of course, and it kind of integrates into your UI quite nicely. I quite like completing my daily and then hovering it over here, and then it's kind of like, hey, look, daily information. It doesn't take up any real crazy space. But what it's actually doing is it's just adding up the information that's in my chat panel right now. You see, I have my regular chat over here. And, you know, I can talk to people, but I've also got a tab set up called Damage Dealt. And what JaxNX is doing that makes it just as safe to use as, say, something like Sweet Effects, is it's taking lots of quick screenshots every second of my client, and when it sees that numbers start coming into my chat log here, it's detecting the font, the text of them, and adding them all up. Simple as that. That is the technology behind it. It is basically automating what you could accomplish on your own. See, Arenanet are giving us the information of the damage we're doing, and if I really cared to, really cared to, what I could do is run up to a monster, start damaging it, start fighting it while I'm recording, you know, then finish the fight, go back to the recording, and very slowly play it back, and very slowly by hand count each little thing in the chat log, and then eventually I just get what JaxNX did on the fly for me. So all this is doing is automating and making easier what is otherwise possible through what Arenanet have given to us. And that, again, is another reason why I think it's pretty safe to use and not something that the devs are looking too closely at. Installation, though, as you can maybe tell from what I just explained to you guys, because it's quite clever the way it works, taking the screenshots and reading images and translating it into text, into numerics. Installation is a little bit precise, all right? So first of all, what you're going to want to do if you want this thing is go to the top link in the description of this video, and from there you'll be able to download JaxNX, you'll be able to install it, and it will put the desktop icon on your desktop. From there, all you have to do is run it. It will give you a little overlay box that you put in front of your Guild Wars 2 screen, or if you have multiple monitors, by the way, like I do, you could just drag this completely off onto the other screen entirely, and it doesn't take up any screen space. But from there, you do have to change a couple of settings in game. See, because it's reading the screenshots in a very specific way, you have to be very specific about the way your chat's set up. So what you need to do is go to your general options, and this is basically the worst thing about it, by the way. You need to go to interface size normal, all right? Now, if you're playing at 1920 by 1080 as your resolution, I hate the normal interface size. I find it too big. I love playing with small interface, which shrinks everything down massively. But for JaxNX to be able to read chat, because the creator, I guess, used a normal interface size too, that's what the only thing it's compatible with. Hopefully in the future, and by the time you guys are watching this video, maybe this will have changed, so be sure to look in the description. Hopefully in the future there'll be other versions of JaxNX that are compatible with more UI scales, but you have to use normal, which means your UI is going to be a little bit bigger. That really gets to me, but hey, at least these days I'm using a 1440p monitor, and I get to have the smaller user interface at the same time too. Excellent. Once you've got that though, that's pretty simple. You also need to set up the chat tab, so I'll just make a new one for you guys here. So what you do is you just click new tab, and you type like combat, or you'd call it, you know, JaxNX is probably the best way to do it. And you want to turn off everything, okay, except combat, which you want to turn on. And in combat, you just want to do your outgoing damage, all right? So you need to turn off all the boxes except these three here: outgoing mitigated damage, outgoing damage, and buff damage. Even mitigated, I don't even know whether you necessarily need. Once you've got those, you need to go to this cog up here in chat options, and you need to make sure the text size too is medium. Again, I used to use small text size, but it wasn't really designed to read that, so you want medium text size. And last of all, again, this one's a bit sucky for people, but you need to have show timestamps off. So if you have show timestamps on, these are all numbers that JaxNX might accidentally read and add in your combat log, which you don't want, so you need to have that turned off. Then last of all, you'll see down here, it's actually telling me what's wrong. It's telling me that I need to scroll down. You need to be scrolled at the very bottom so that as you're fighting and all the numbers roll in, it can read it easy enough. And there you go, that's it, that's it. While you're fighting, make sure you have this open, make sure that you have chat actually shown. See here, it's telling me that I need to unhide the chat panel. You need that up. and then you're good. Unfortunately, having medium text, having a medium-sized UI scale, and being asked to constantly have the chat box up, if you're at certain resolutions, like if you're below 1920 by 1080, expect to have a lot of windows on your screen. It can feel pretty crappy. This video looks really good, and it looks really seamless and integrated, but it's not necessarily going to be that comfortable for everybody. I'm also, on that topic, sort of lying to you guys a little bit. There are actually, as it so happens, 2 different versions of JaxNX. There's original JaxNX that was made, and then somebody else made a fork of it. What's the difference between the 2 of them? Well, I'll demonstrate to you guys. This is the forked version that you can see here. If we close this down, I'll get rid of that, and I'll open my other version of JaxNX. You'll see that the default regular original version of JaxNX is actually a lot more intrusive. It's a proper window. Now, you can enable a little bit of transparency on it, but it's a little window that will appear here. So I like the forked version. It's got a couple of little improvements that just make it integrate into your UI a little bit better. I have found it a bit clunky too. But this is regular JaxNX, and if you do everything I said in this video, this is what you'll end up with. So, what else do we have here? Well, after you've installed it, you get a couple more options, and these are important to pay attention to because, again, this thing can be kind of inaccurate. So, you get, first of all, a reset button. Now, whenever you click this, it resets all the damage back to 0. So, if I go get in a fight somewhere, you know, let's blow up this Sparkfly with the biggest hit we can possibly imagine, which would be, I don't know, us equipping our dagger in our offhand and using a massive churning earth. And when we blow this guy up, we're going to do a crazy amount of damage. And you see that it detected our highest hit, 9,500 damage on Churning Earth, and it begins the fight, right? So, if we don't want these numbers here after it's detected I'm out of combat there after 6 seconds, I can just click this to reset it, and we can go again. There's also this button here, which is auto reset, which is great, which means if that's enabled, it will automatically just clear it back to 0 after a certain amount of time out of combat every time. Next button is a bit of transparency for you if you like. Makes it a lot harder to read, so I wouldn't use this, but you can if, again, you want more screen space. And then finally, you get this cog. This is important. Early versions of JaxNX didn't have this, and the software got kind of a bit of a reputation for being a poor DPS meter, especially compared to those other ones that hook into RAM and are a bit more questionable in terms of breaking the end-user license agreement. And that's because, with this whole screenshot technology, it can accidentally, say, double up on a line. If you're playing like a heavy condition damage character, like you can see on screen right now, where there's tons of numbers going across. You've got the hits from your base damage. You've got the hits from multiple condis going off at once on tons of enemies all at once. Your chat log is going to be flying past. That text is going to be coming hard and fast. And how the hell can JaxNX keep up with that? Well, in the original versions, it didn't very well. And what that meant was you kind of lost damage. It didn't show you a good number. And worse than that, it could be inaccurate and actually count the same number twice, which would artificially bloat the number. So you got to be careful with your settings. So back here to have a look here, guys. These are what you get to play with. You get to play with screenshots that it takes per second. You can go all the way up to, I don't know what max actually is, but you can go up to 25. You've got updates per second, which is how many times the actual overlay itself will refresh. You've got seconds in combat, which determines how long it will keep counting for, and then eventually, if you leave combat for that amount of time, then it's gone. And then you've got considered lines. Considered lines is the lines in your chat box, okay? So right now, it's considering 27 lines, which I believe is top to bottom if you have your chat box completely maxed out. My most trusted settings, for what it's worth, are these. Specifically, this depends on the kind of build you play, though. I have listened quite closely, I believe, to the community, to respected people that do kind of the maths and stuff. What they've been saying this is most accurate with. And basically, you're either going to be on 15 screenshots per second on kind of a more power-based build, like a Staff Elementalist or something, or you're going to be on 20 on something like, say, a Condi Necromancer. The temptation might be to max all this stuff out, but I think it gets kind of buggy and weird if you do. So these would be my most trusted settings. I'd have the chat box completely maxed out, and that's how you're going to get the most accurate JaxNX setup, and that's basically the best way that it can work. Now that you know how it works, it should be obvious. Yes, this is compatible with ICM, right? Like the software that enables and disables your user interface. But is it compatible with SweetFX and Reshade? Well, in this video, yes, I'm demonstrating to you that indeed it is, or specifically with Reshade, but only through Mask UI. So, as you guys might imagine, if you start playing with color, if you start playing with sharpening, if you start doing things that tweaks and drastically affects the way that your chat box looks, then JaxNX is going to have a much harder time reading text, and it will really start throwing your accuracy off, which you do not want. So what you need to do if you want to have your cake and eat it too is you need to run a UI mask. That's a feature of Reshade you guys should be aware of. What it does is it actually disables Reshade on certain areas of the screen. So for example, as I toggle it on and off here, you'll notice my chat box actually doesn't change at all. And that's because I have a mask there that means it will never affect that region of the screen. So I'll demonstrate it better here. If I hide the chat box, okay, it's not there. Look at what my graphical overlay is doing. It's affecting the entire screen, but not this area here. This is regular old bland vanilla Guild Wars 2 with no effects applied to it. And I've done that specifically so that JaxNX doesn't get interfered with. So it is possible, but you kind of have to do that little tweak there. Very simple stuff, but I thought I'd mention it. So now that we've talked about the installation, now that we know how it works, now that we know what the whole deal is, I do want to talk a little bit about my experiences with this because it has been very cool. Maybe I'm waiting a bit late in the video to express this to you guys, but seriously, this thing is awesome, especially if you raid. I really don't think it matters for TPVP. I really don't think it matters for any open world content, any meta event, any dungeon, any fractal at this point. But maybe with future patches that will change. But definitely for raids and also world versus world, I believe, too, if you're in big zergs. This is going to be really, really, really eye-opening. So I'd always known, I'd been told by other people in the community, hey, Elementalist does really, really good damage. But I never got to experience that properly until I ran JaxNX and I tried out my Staff Eddie build and I got to see, you know, what my rough numbers were. I now know quite comfortably that pretty much every class in the game, if you're optimized in a raid, is hitting somewhere around the 20,000 damage a second mark. In a raid, 20k DPS. That's really interesting because what you guys would see if you're just running around on your own in the open world, your damage will barely get past 10k. So it's kind of like you double it when you optimize perfectly and you're in a really good comp with everyone else. You really get to see the margins between the good builds and the bad builds. Of course, if you're running like a tanky build or a healy build, then it's going to be far more exaggerated. But I mean, specifically for builds that try to do damage, they're actually all really close to each other. And it's fun to get that first-hand perspective. So I had two very different builds I like to play. One was the flat damage, power, staff-based Elementalist. The other was a condition damage Necromancer. And when I went to the condition damage Necromancer, I was super shocked to see how much lower the damage was. How much more I had to pay attention to the skills I was using, and how much more involved and fun the gameplay was, double bouncing epidemics. But, you know, that it was still so hard to meet the same damage that my Elementalist was getting so much easier. And, you know, I was really proud of myself. I actually, unfortunately, don't have any footage of me on the Necromancer at Sabbatha last week. But at Sabbatha, you know, we had multiple attempts. We kept wiping on her, but this meant I got to see how much damage I was doing over long encounters. Often, I would only just get to about 19,000 damage per second on that Necromancer, right towards the end of the Sabbatha fight. But then I had this one golden run where I hit every single double epidemic bounce with my friend that we were communicating in TeamSpeak perfectly, and I hit that 19k super fast, and it was really cool to see that by paying more attention, by being really careful, by getting the perfect dodges and everything, I'd actually managed to buff the numbers up that much higher. This is the kind of thing I would love to have had in Guild Wars 2 natively, and I'm so happy that JaxNX now exists. That means I can have this experience without really any fear of, you know, it being somehow dodgy for the game. I really don't think that this kind of thing's going to break down the community. There's no way that anyone can easily force this on you, and because it's still only really useful and fun for a certain subset of players and certain subsets of the game, I really don't foresee it being an issue in any way. So I thoroughly recommend you guys check it out. It is a lot of fun. Do take it with a grain of salt. This is the main thing I'd like you guys to know if you are going into this. It is not perfectly accurate. Even with everything I said, I don't believe I've ever heard anyone with absolute, explicit 100% confidence in its accuracy. But JaxNX is far more accurate than it used to be now, especially with the extra settings. And certainly, it seems that the community is rallying around it. Not only is there regular JaxNX at this point, but there's the forked version I showed you at the start of the video, and funnily enough, people are actually making a networked version where if everyone on your team tries to run it, it will group up all the JaxNX results all at once, and you can see live on the fly how you compare to your friends. That's very interesting. That may have more implications for the community, and we'll cross that bridge when that's a little bit more robust and a little bit more solid as some software. But yeah, that's JaxNX for you guys. If you see numbers randomly on some of my videos in the future and you wonder what it is, that's my DPS meter. That's how it works. And that's how to install it. Thanks very much for watching, everyone. Let me know what you think about this. It's a huge topic, and like I say, I cannot believe I'm doing a video on such a thing. But here we are. Believe me, by the time the next wing comes out, you may be getting requested by some people to run this. So let's see what we think about it for now. Thanks very much for watching the video, guys. Hope you have a great day, and I will see you tomorrow.